Hi, and welcome to In the Cosm. I'm your host, Canadian speculative fiction author Kat Gordon. I've started this podcast so I can chat with authors and other creatives I simply fangirl over. I hope you enjoy diving into my microcosm and feel inspired to seek out the works of these amazing humans. Hi, I'm Kat Gordon, and today is a unique day because it's my first episode with two guests. And not just any guests, but Robert Kingett and Randy Lacey, who are the editors-in-chief of the upcoming Artifical Divide, an anthology where the authors and their protagonists are blind, visually impaired, or who have low vision. Robert Kingett is a totally blind author and accessibility advocate. He writes fiction and nonfiction, but is often involved in many consulting positions. He also contributes to many research papers in his spare time. Since 2010, Randy Lacey has been adapting to his new life as a visually impaired individual. He's been a writer of poetry since the late 70s, and since 2013, he has self-published books of poetry as well. Randy has now entered the world of short stories and hopes to release a collection in the near future. When he's not busy with writing, Randy blends spices and creates hot sauces. Welcome, Robert and Randy.
Hey.
Hey, thank you for having us.
This is such a treat for me to have you both in my microcosm at the same time, because I've actually just finished reading Artifical Divide as one of your support editors.
Well, there you go. I'm glad we can both fit.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to start with you, Robert, because I remember we had a discussion over Twitter where you wanted to do an anthology like this. Can you please share with our audience how you came up with this idea and why?
Sure. So I came up with the idea because I just saw a gap within publishing that really wasn't being taken advantage of. And also at the time I saw a lot of writers actually getting rejected, not for the quality of their work, but because their character had a disability or disabilities. So I wanted to create opportunities for others. And so so I got the idea to make an anthology that would showcase authors and showcase their work to kind of give everybody a taste of, well, hey, this is the kind of talent that you're missing out on.
Absolutely, for sure. Randy, what was your reaction at being asked to be a co-editor-in-chief for this collection of stories?
That opportunity came about rather innocently. I was in one of my groups that I am on Facebook, and somebody private messaged me saying, who knew that I was visually impaired, and suggested that I get in contact with Nathan and talk to them about a project that was being produced. And so I reached out to Nathan, and who responded to me, and it just went from there. And you know, I've got no experience at this, or you know, I just write. I don't do anything else but write. And he convinced me that, you know, it wasn't that difficult, not to belittle the job or the task at hand, but in defining what he wanted me to do, I felt it was within my grasp to be able to do that. So I gladly jumped on board, and I haven't regretted it one bit.
That's wonderful. You know, it's, each of your responses are so relatable to me because with Robert saying, wanting to showcase these voices, that's how I felt with the Nothing Without Us anthology. And Randy, I had no experience at all as an editor-in-chief of an anthology. And I think that's the thing I love. Randy mentioned Nathan. That's Nathan Frechette from Renaissance Press. Yes. Nathan is wonderful at encouraging people to do things, even if we're unsure of ourselves. So I'm so glad the two of you work together on this. Robert, why is the anthology called Artificial Divide?
Because there is always this misconception that the blind and the sighted are worlds apart, and that could not be farther from the truth. Even among those who may not be visually impaired, but who may have other disabilities, they sometimes see blindness as just a whole another world. So I tried to be clever, and I thought, well, we're not literally divided, we're artificially divided. So that's basically where that came from. And I learned that I'm not as clever as everybody else thinks. So
I don't know, you seem pretty clever to me.
Thank you.
I actually sorry. Go ahead.
But it's to kind of show that we're not as divided as everybody likes to think. Because even though these protagonists have low vision or are totally blind, they love and they hurt and they have pain, and they're brilliant, just like you.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's so important. A lot of times people with various conditions, disabilities, states of being are just reduced to these tropes and cliches, which I feel are also propagated through fiction. So the fact that I was so happy to know that this collection was another a collection of fiction stories, because I'm sure I've said this every episode of the podcast, but I feel that fiction has such a power to influence, sometimes even more than nonfiction, even though nonfiction is extremely valuable as well. And I was just thrilled. Did it matter to you, Randy, as well? Randy, did it matter to you that these stories were fiction as opposed to essay based?
I like the idea of fiction because people can then try to put themselves into that picture and imagine themselves. So it draws a reader in rather than informs the reader through real stories. Fiction, at least people can, like I said, picture themselves within. And it's not too hard to imagine that way as it is to in reality. I could give you countless numbers of stories where people tried to identify with me in real life, but have no clue. But through reading, it's easier.
Right. Yeah. Storytelling, I guess it's an age-old thing, right? I mean, when you think about fairy tales and fables, right? They have influenced for millennia, really. So we're just kind of carrying on the torch by releasing anthologies like this.
Absolutely.
So now I know how I felt when I was editing an anthology for the first time, being at the other side of the anthology table. Can you share with us, both of you, your delights and the challenges you faced during the selection process? Robert, I'll begin with you.
Okay, so this really opened my eyes because I've been pitching to magazines and anthologies for years and years. So I did not really appreciate the time it takes and the effort it takes to really read and go through a submission and make a decision. That just had never crossed my mind of how much importance one line or one paragraph is. So what I really liked about the process is it really opened my eyes to how to be a better writer myself.
Interesting.
Because you can see where the rest of the story is really good, except for this one tiny part that just in a short story, things have to be much more concise. So if one tiny thing is a little askew, then your story, it doesn't fall apart, but it feels how do I say this? It feels like there's something missing and it's just out of reach and you can't quite grab it.
Right.
One of the difficulties I've had is quite honestly choosing the final stories for the anthology, because there were just so many good possibilities that just had one little thing that did not add up or
Right. Yes. Oh, yes.
or yeah. So you know exactly how it feels. So like and let me be clear, it's not a reflection on the writer. Sometimes it just literally comes down to the personal taste of the editor. But one thing I tried to do is try to give personal feedback on every single rejection, because that makes a world of difference when you have a person who can really sit you down and say, hey, your strength is your world building. But there's this part in the middle where I got kind of lost. So that really helps a writer much more than just say your story is rejected. but I want writers to know that even if your story is not chosen, it doesn't mean that you're a bad writer. There's so many kind of factors that you don't have privy to, so don't take it personally.
Oh, there's so much you said there that I'm like, oh gosh, yes. I think this is a therapy episode for me.
Right.
Randy,
Yes.
what were the delights and the challenges for you with story selection?
The world of the short story is a fairly new one to me, especially writing. And it wasn't until I took a poetry course through, anyway, it doesn't matter who it's from, but my instructor told me to start editing my poetry. And I was like, really? Edit? You edit poetry? I just always thought you just write it and that's the way it was meant to be. So when the stories started coming in, the submissions for this anthology, I really learned the need for editing. But that's not to say that the stories weren't good. Some stories missed the point of the whole anthology altogether, which was probably the hardest thing for me, because some of the stories were good, but they had nothing to do with blind or visually impaired. That was an afterthought to the story.
Right. Yes.
And I really hated tossing some of those aside. But I mean, the main principle or the main theme of this anthology was blind, visually impaired, and then everything, not everything. And oh, by the way, I'm blind or visually impaired. So that was the hard thing for me.
Yeah. When I laugh, it's like laughing because I completely understand. Can we just say here officially on the In the Cosm podcast,
Sure.
study the guidelines.
Yes.
We craft
Study
submission guidelines for a reason.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. One thing that I did learn throughout this whole process, I'm not really sure this is true for other people, but I've learned that I am really good at giving constructive criticism, and I had no idea.
I did because I hired you. Folks, I hired Robert to be a sensitivity editor for a blind character I had in kind of a mermaid fantasy story. I had a blind character in it, and he offers very constructive, extremely useful criticism. So yes, you do. I knew that before you did.
Well, beans. Yay.
What about, are there particular stories in Artificial Divide that really grasped you? I mean, I know every story is important or else you wouldn't have put it in there, but were there some that you just said, I have to have this in my anthology or in our anthology? Randy, do you feel any stories that really resonated with you?
There were a few. I basically, as I read them, or I used a reader, as they were being read to me, I used a 5-star rating and rated them as such. And Robert and I agreed on quite a few of them. But Vision, the story of Abdil, really caught me. It was a heart-wrenching kind of story. You'll have to buy the book to read it. So, I encourage you to. But it was a heart-wrenching little story. So much said in so few words. And that's the kind of story I like. And it grabbed me and it held me. I felt I almost cried. I don't cry because I don't, but anyway, it was just one of those stories, that grips you and you want to feel for this person.
Mm.
So that was the big one, and there was a couple of other ones. The title escapes me right now, but there were a few that were really like that one. But Vision, I think, was the big one for me.
Okay. Thank you. Robert, what about you?
Sure. So I liked three of them. I just for future note, authors who are looking to possibly submit to me in the future. I like character-driven stories. So the three that really grabbed me were Vision. That one, at first, I thought I missed a point or something, but I realized that, oh, I just read it on a bad day. And then when I read it again later, it just hit me like, oh my gosh, this is a really great story. The two other ones that really grabbed me and held me were Firefly of Hope.
Oh yeah. Sorry. I like that one.
Yeah, because I love I this is my warped taste coming into play. But I love I love revenge stories where the protagonist is really smart and they have to overcome so many things using their brains. The third one that just, oh my gosh, you guys have to read, is a story called Inspiration Porn Star.
Yes.
That one,
I agree.
It just wow.
Also the title, Inspiration Porn Star.
Yeah.
I even told Talia about that title and we just laughed because it's just it's such a great
when
title.
I read that title, I almost just bypassed the story, but I'm glad I didn't.
Well, I think for a lot of us in the disability community, particularly like when it comes to like storytelling, inspiration porn is tedious. It's just so tedious. It takes away all of our humanity. Robert was saying earlier about, hey, there really isn't a divide. If there's a divide, it's an artificial one. It's true. When you do inspiration porn, if you write characters whose only benefit is to help the abled neurotypical person, or they get to overcome their disability or whatnot, I mean, the rest of us are like, really though, like it's just, yeah. So I did laugh heartily when I saw that title because I thought it was a little bit on the brilliant side.
Right. And then I read it and my whole entire world was just shattered. And that when you get through with a really good story and you're thinking about it, hours later, that you've hit a home run.
Yes.
So,
I love when
yes.
stories have that effect, for sure. And if they are whirling through your mind, yeah, that's something that belongs in your anthology.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so we're kind of,
Can I be uh, 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 can I be greedy and add one more story to the list of favorites? Or
absolutely, go ahead.
woohoo. So one more of my favorite stories was called Noah and the Dragon,
Yeah.
for the simple reason that the protagonist takes challenges that she has been given, and she overcomes the challenges, not her disabilities.
Yes,
So
exactly. I loved
yes.
that story as well. And I
Yes.
loved it. That was the one. It was a fantastical story, right? And so
Yes.
she had to deal
Yes.
with just learning how to navigate her world while blind in sort of almost a medieval like fantastical setting.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
yeah, I loved
Yeah.
that one
Yeah.
too. So
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
good. I'm glad I let you say that. So I'm going to switch gears as we're rounding up this session already. Let's talk about your works. So I want to know what are some works and recently published titles each of you have had. I'll start with you, Randy, or something that's coming up.
Um, Basically, what I tend to do is I will go a year. Everything that I write within that year, I publish the next year, self-publish. So at the end of 2020, it was really hard to get anything in print at all because of current world conditions.
Yeah.
So although the book was released earlier later in 2020, I was only able to get printed copies in January of this year of my latest collection of poetry, which is entitled From Somewhere Deep Within.
Nice.
Yes, and the picture on the cover I took when I was down in the Dominican Republic, and I designed the cover myself, and it's just poetry from the year 2020, or sorry, yeah, 2019, sorry. And so right now I'm working on two other books from the accumulated poems of 2020. And I have no title for that. Well, I've got a couple of working titles, but nothing definitive yet. But that's what I've got. I've got two more. I'm also working on, as you mentioned, short stories. So I've been entering contests, and with the rejections, I've been putting them towards a short story compilation. And basically, the title is going to be called, what's it going to be called? I totally forgot now. Anyway, so it's for short stories under 2,000 words. And
Nice.
yeah, basically, and not so many words. That's what it's called.
Not so many words. That's a brilliant title for
I love it.
right? Hello. Let's just give an award for that book based on the title.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
So that's what I've got going on right now.
That's great. That's really good. And I just want to say, I always feel writing is never a waste of time. And I love when authors who have received rejections decide, you know what, I'm going to put this in my own compilation, right? Because it is true. Like sometimes you get rejected just because the editor has a certain feel for the magazine or the anthology that they're putting out. And even though your story is good, it might not even match with that feel. So it has nothing to do with the quality of the writing or anything like that. So I love that you're kind of saying, okay, that's fine. I wasn't a good fit for them, but here's my compilation. Then you gave it a brilliant title. So everybody wins.
Well, we hope.
So Robert, do you have anything other than the amazing Artificial Divide coming out?
Well, no, not this year, but I hope that next year I will have a children's book coming out. I do have some really great news in the sense that I am actually looking over literary agent
Ooh.
contracts. So I have actually gotten a few offers there. So we shall see. 2020 was a really, really hard year for my writing.
Mm,
Nothing really clicked. So
yeah.
2021, I something happened where I finished a children's book, and I went hunting for literary agents, and I got multiple offers,
Oh my
and now
gosh.
I just have to choose. So
Okay, so that's awesome.
yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
I hope
So
you'll still speak to us when you're like uber famous.
well, of course I will.
What was her name? Cat something Morgan? Cat Morgan? Was that her name?
Which I kind of have to say is so ironic, because 2020 was just the year of rejections.
Yeah. It
Each and
happens, doesn't it?
everything,
Right?
yeah. So
Yeah.
each and everything I did. So it's kind of ironic that I said, okay, I'll just try this and not even actually think about it and see what happens. And I thought I was actually going to get a ton of rejections, and the opposite
Wow.
happened. So yeah.
You just gotta keep trying, right? Like that's the way the game is played. Congratulations. That's amazing.
No,
Yeah.
So now I'm down to my final question, which is my favorite. It's what is a fun fact about yourself? Robert, tell us a fun fact about yourself that we wouldn't know.
A fun fact about myself was I had a pet rooster
Oh,
for almost 5 years.
oh my gosh. That's awesome. I did not expect you to say that. So may I just ask how you come across getting a pet rooster? Like, I guess I was born on concrete. I'm a real city girl, so
this is the fun fact that I don't even know about myself. It just kind of materialized out of thin air,
okay.
literally. So I like, because I was walking home from the store, and I just happened to notice that a little baby rooster, I don't actually know what they're called, was actually following me home. So I said, okay, come on in. So yeah.
Amazing.
So, Robert, was that a general store?
Wow. I think you're literally the only person I have ever met who had a little rooster chick or whatnot follow him home. that's That's astounding. I guarantee nobody else's fun fact will be that. So it's very, very unique.
You have no idea.
So
I'm
Sorry, I'm going to move on to Randy because we're running out of time. So Randy, what is a fun fact about yourself?
I have got nothing that can compare to that. I've got a lot of fun facts. And for some of them I can't tell you, or I'd have to bury the bodies, but I was an extra in Rocky IV, the movie.
Go away with yourself.
cool.
No, seriously, it was filmed in Vancouver, and I was a street person in Vancouver at the time.
Wow.
I lived on the streets for a few years, so.
Okay.
But that was fun. It was a lot of fun getting to meet the stars and seeing how Hollywood works.
Gee, I love these questions. I've learned, I don't think I'm actually going to erase either of those fun facts from my mind about you guys when I talk to you next time. Look, thank you so much for coming aboard. This is actually going to be the last episode of the first season of my my podcast. So I'm ending it off with a bang with you two. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us. And one final quick note from me. Writers are not your competition. They're just friends that you haven't met yet. So don't ever think a writer is your competition.
I absolutely agree. It's so great when we all collaborate and support and celebrate each other's wins, and support each other through the not so wins just yet moments. Thank you so much for that. Folks, you can learn more about Robert by visiting his website, blindjournalist@wordpress.com. And you can learn more about Randy at his website, therandylacey.ca. Transcripts for In the Cosm are available at catgordon.com. That's CAIT Gordon.com. Thanks for joining us. Take care and stay safe.